Hi everyone. So this is the first progress report for Winter Fantasy. It's this piece I've been learning and recording my progress as I learn this piece. Once again, all the unedited footage will be uploaded as unlisted videos, and the links will be down below. That's just for you to see the entire learning process without any edits, so that you can actually see when your teacher tell you to practice 2 bars for an hour. That's what we actually mean, and that did actually happen when I was learning this piece over the last week. There was one day where I spent almost the entire hour on just 2 bars of the piece. Anyway, so first week, what I focused on is just learning the techniques required for this piece. Basically just the fingerings, learning the notes. There's some tricky stuff in here note-wise that I had to sort out. I won't go into too much detail about the actual learning process. If you're interested in that, go ahead and check out the practice videos. I pretty much go through the entire video telling you what I'm thinking at the time, what I'm trying to achieve. But there's some overall things I want to address. So first things first, when we practice, we want to have a clear goal, and it's a very specific goal. So for example, at the beginning of each day, I would say I plan on learning 2 lines of music or 3 lines of music or this entire section of music. Be realistic with your goals. It's fine if you don't achieve it. There's a couple of days where I said I was going to learn maybe 3 lines, but I only ended up learning 2. That's completely okay, but having a goal that you can focus on prevents you from kind of getting going off too far, getting bored and like trying to read through the whole piece. That's just not productive. Yeah, so having a goal is very important. Another thing was learning notes correctly the first time. Your brain does not differentiate between right and wrong. It just remembers patterns. So if you're learning notes incorrectly, it takes you more time to fix it. Even if it's the first 5 minutes, even if it's the second time playing it, if you're learning something wrong, your brain is more inclined to remember that wrong thing as the thing to do. So important. Learning it correctly the first time. If that means playing it at quarter tempo, playing it without a metronome, playing it out of rhythm, learn the notes correctly the first time. Also along the same lines is when you're speeding up your tempo when you're learning. Once you've learned the notes, you're playing it with a metronome and you're speeding it up. Don't be afraid to go backwards if you're having trouble at the new tempo. There's a couple of times where I sped up too quickly while I was practicing, and I wasn't quite getting the fingers at the new tempo, so I had to go back and slow it back down and practice it a little bit more at the slower tempo. It's absolutely okay to go backwards. Once again, the most important thing is to learn it correctly. Okay. On that same note, using a metronome, very important. Even if there are tempo changes, there are accelerando, whatever, use a metronome. Always use a metronome. You have to be able to play everything with the metronome at a steady tempo before you can start adding in eggshells and rits and all that fancy stuff. Doesn't matter if you're the most musical person in the world. If you're playing all the wrong notes, there's no point. You're not playing what is on the page. You're just not playing music at that point, pretty much. So always start with the technique. After you've gotten the technique down, you can add all the fancy stuff. So yeah, use a metronome, even when there are metric modulations, tempo changes, whatever. Find a way to have a steady pulse if it's a metric modulation. If it's a tempo change, you can just learn it without the tempo change and then add the tempo changes later. Another thing is when you're playing slowly, focus on the details. Be really picky. A lot of times we're just going through the motion, or a lot of younger students are just going through the motion of practicing slowly, but their brain is not actively engaged. You want to be engaged when you're practicing slowly. Pay attention to details. Pay attention to different details on different repetitions. There's so much things going on when we play music that our brain can't possibly focus on everything all the time. So pick something and focus on that thing. There are a lot of detail that gets overlooked when you start playing fast because your brain just can't keep up. So at the slower tempo, it's a good time to nip those problems in the bud. So that you don't have to worry about them when you speed up the tempo, and it's just automatic. So some of the stuff I'm talking about is finger coordination is a very, very important one. If you don't have it down correctly, if you're just slightly out of sync at slower tempo, it might not matter at the slower tempo, but when you speed it up, you're going to run into trouble. So finger coordination, rhythm is another one. I know I said learn the notes without rhythm first, but once you start putting it together with a rhythm, make sure that rhythm is correct. Same thing, when you get faster, if the rhythm's not correct, you're going to throw yourself off. And then focus on connection between notes. That's another important one. That kind of goes hand in hand with finger coordination, but sometimes it's not just the finger coordination that is the problem with connecting notes. Voicing is also important for connecting notes, especially when you're going over the break or doing large leaps. So focus on those details. Be really honest with yourself when you're practicing. If something sounds okay, but it doesn't feel good, be honest with yourself that it needs more work. Okay, if something sounds right, but when you're playing it, you feel panicked or it just doesn't feel like you're in absolute control, don't say, oh, that's fine, and speed it up. Okay, be honest with yourself. If you're not feeling good about this passage, if the fingers feel rushed, if you feel panicked, you feel like you've barely scraped by, you don't feel in control, be honest with yourself and just don't be in a hurry to get faster. So this is dealing with both the mental side of practicing as well as the physical side of practicing. The mental side is very, very important. You have to avoid going into autopilot mode, especially when you're practicing slow, because it is boring. Let's be honest here. Slow practice is boring, but you have to find ways to stay engaged when you're practicing slowly, or else you're not really doing any good, and you're just going through the motion. And although going through the motion itself is helpful, when your brain is actively engaged, the retention of that information is a lot better. And speaking of retention, don't be afraid to go back the next day and relearn some of the stuff. I know when I was learning this, there were a couple of times where the stuff from previous day didn't quite stick. Most of the time, I think there was only one time where I actually went back and learned it again. But most of it, I just kept going and continue learning the new stuff. But that's because I know later on that I'm going to go back and add in all the other stuff that I'm not worried about when I'm learning notes, such as dynamics, articulation, and whatnot. And I'll have another chance then to kind of reinforce the finger stuff. But if you want you can absolutely go back and relearn the stuff from yesterday, but make sure you're still progressing. Yeah, just don't expect to have perfect retention of the stuff you learned previously. For next week's video, which the next progress report, which I kind of started the practice session for earlier today, where I just go through the entire piece. And the first time I did that, there was definitely about half the stuff that my brain just could not remember or were remembering in the wrong order. So it's absolutely okay if you don't retain everything from the previous day. Don't be bogged down by... I wouldn't say don't be bogged down, but just don't be discouraged if you've forgotten stuff you've learned before. That's absolutely normal. Not just in music, but like when you're studying for a test, you're not going to remember everything. That's why we advocate reviewing every day, not cramming for tests. Anyways, so yeah, both the mental and physical aspect of practicing are very important. So I go through in the practice videos, I say what I'm thinking at the time. So for those of you that are kind of like, I practice a lot, I just go through the motion, I don't really know what I'm doing, go watch those videos. Maybe you'll get some ideas about what to pay attention to, how to stay engaged. And there's one very important thing that I did not realize until I did these videos, is how much time I actually spend practicing slowly. I knew I spent a lot of time practicing slowly. I spent a majority of my time on slow practice when I'm learning music, when I'm learning the technique, but I didn't realize how much time exactly. I would be recording the videos and I would finish learning 2 bars, and I would think to myself, that's probably about half an hour, right? And then I look at the recording and no, I've been recording for an hour. So when your teacher tell you spend an hour on 2 bars, that's not an exaggeration. And this piece for me is considered rather on the easier side. If I had to give a rating out of 10, maybe a 3.5 out of 10 for technical difficulty. So this isn't a very difficult piece for me, and I'm still spending an entire hour on just 2 bars. So yeah, that's one thing that I did not realize until I made these videos, is how much time I actually spend learning things slowly. It's much longer than I thought I was spending. So over the last 7 days, I took 1 day off during the week, so I practiced for 6 days. 7 days. Took me 7 days. We're Tuesday now. This is day 8. Well, day 9, but I took a day off, so this is day 8 of actually practicing. So the first 7 days, I pretty much just learned the notes and whatnot. I spent a total of 6.5 hours learning 3 pages of notes. Okay, so that took 6.5 hours of just practicing slowly, and that's just learning the notes, not adding in the dynamics, not adding in the articulations. Of course, some of it I was doing as I was learning, but a lot of the stuff I'm not making a final decision on until I come back to it and start making musical decisions. So 6.5 hours over 7 days to learn 3 pages of music. That's probably I would say shorter time than I expect if I was to learn something around my own level. I've easily spent an entire week learning 1 page of music. That's normal as well. So once again, this piece of music for me is on the easier side technique wise. So 6.5 hours, 3 pages. If you're learning something for a lesson, if you're learning say a 1-page etude, expect to spend 3-4 hours on that 1-page etude. over the course of a week to at least have the technique down. So yeah, I don't want this video to be too long. So that's more or less the roundup for the first week of learning Winter Fantasy. Once again, the unedited practice videos are linked in the description of the intro video, as well as any of the progress videos I'll be making. So they'll be unlisted so that it doesn't flood my channel of just practicing videos, because nobody wants to see that. I don't expect you to watch all the videos either, not every minute of it at least. But yeah, there are some things that I didn't even realize I was doing when I was doing until I've gone back and watched the videos and recorded myself in a good way, not in a bad way. But yeah, I think that's it for this week. I'll see you in the next progress report and the next practice video, I guess. I hope this is helpful. See you next time.